Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you to those who are tuning in on our live stream as well. Welcome to the 12th Annual Menus of Change Leadership Summit here at the CIA in the beautiful Hudson Valley. My name is Abby Fairmartino. It's an honor to serve as the new Director of Health and Sustainability Programs and Research on our CIA Industry Leadership and Strategic Initiatives team. I have actually inherited this fabulous program that we're about to experience from my dear colleague and outgoing program director, Allison Reiter. And Allison really thoughtfully curated this program over the last year, along with our advisory council and our team. So incorporating top trends, research, challenges, opportunities for us to overcome in the industry today. And I want to make sure that we give a moment to recognize Allison. Allison is now the Director of Membership and Programs at the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative, which actually had its origins as part of the CIA Industry Leadership Group. So let's please take a moment, join me in thanking Allison for her hard work. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so on behalf of my colleagues at the CIA and our partners at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy careers and lives to be here with us today, investing in your professional development and investing in the community that we're building around transitioning our food system to be more sustainable and healthy. So this is something to celebrate. So I would like us to just give ourselves a round of applause for being here. Thank those of you around your neighbors. Thank your neighbors for being here. It really takes all of us showing up to enact the system level change that we wish to see. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here. It is perhaps more important than ever to be pausing and listening in to the challenges and also the best strategies and breakthrough opportunities for us to see change happen in the food system today. This is our chance to work together to lead to our consumers, our organizations, toward a more sustainable food future for all. Before I proceed, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather today. The Culinary Institute of America overlooks the Mahicanatuck, the Hudson River, named by the Mohican people, meaning the waters that are never still. The land upon which the campus sits is the ancestral home of the Wappingers and the Mohicans, both of whom belong to the Algonquin-speaking indigenous peoples. We honor the indigenous people who came before us and to those with we now reside. We offer gratitude to their fertile grounds, which continue to offer us the nourishment that we need through its bounty of foods, cultural exchange, and unceasing opportunities of learning. So I'd like to begin the program this year by sharing the vision for the Menus of Change. For over 20 years now, the CIA and the Harvard Chan School have worked together to translate the most up-to-date evidence-based nutrition science into actionable strategies for the industry in service of shifting consumer diets and improving public health. Over a decade ago, the two organizations integrated a framework for the industry incorporating both nutrition science and sound environmental science, emphasizing foods that are environmentally sustainable, healthy, socially responsible, and most importantly, delicious. The intention of this framework is to inform practical business models and strategies for change within the food service industry and the culinary profession at large. And so began the Menus of Change. At the foundation of this initiative are the 24 principles of healthy, sustainable menus, which integrate this nutrition and environmental science and serve as an open source roadmap for the industry, covering everything from menu concepts to procurement principles, general operations, and even recommendations on ingredient use in menus. With the input from our two advisory councils over the years, these represent solid evidence-based solutions for sustainable change. Over the years, we've seen impact from companies and individuals who are taking action inspired by these principles, and now we can see this happening on nearly every sector of the food service industry. And while the principles remain at the core of the initiative and the summit today, Menus of Change extends far beyond this annual gathering. For us at the CIA, it's really an organizing force behind an entire ecosystem of initiatives, of people working throughout the year, operationalizing the principles within our industry and within our own educational curriculum. Through the dedication of operators, academics, scientists, students, nutritionists, sustainability managers, and of course, chefs, the Menus of Change principles are moving our industry forward, and this happens through our industry sector year-round collaboratives and through our digital learning programs. And to give you a sense of the impact of these initiatives, let's take a quick look at what's happening across the lifespan of our consumers, starting with our Healthy Kids Collaborative of K through 12 school food operators that are feeding 11 million students a day, to our University Research Collaborative that influences the eating behaviors and food literacy of college students, serving over 800,000 meals a day, to our Healthy Menus R&D Collaborative, who influence the menus of high-volume commercial retail operations, serving 38 million meals a day. So talk about scale. I'd like to acknowledge the members of our year-round collaboratives who are with us today. Many of them are presenting and part of the summit as well. We also have our Plant Forward Kitchen Training Initiative, which was developed in partnership with Google and Lobster Inc., and that seeks to spread and scale the technical skills necessary to promote the Menus of Change principles across the industry, training industry cooks with the skills and knowledge necessary for our culinary workforce to be change agents in this movement. And over the years, we've created a number of related resources to Menus of Change. The Protein Flip Strategy Guide, you might have seen the banners out in the lobby. This is one of them. And we also promoted a lot of materials around the term and trend of Plant Forward. And Plant Forward is our shorthand for operationalizing these principles, and it ultimately represent the direction that we need to champion as an industry. Plant Forward is not an all or nothing campaign. It's certainly not black or white. It's not meat or no meat. Really, Plant Forward is a journey to create an array of dishes that focus on less meat, better meat, and that feature more plants and still deliver on a durable eating experience. This is a way for us to meet consumers where they are and help lead them to where we need them to go without excluding meat eaters altogether. And Plant Forward has now become a movement. And in recent years, we've been able to highlight and celebrate the incredible innovations that are happening in the industry through our Plant Forward Industry Watch List. And tomorrow afternoon, you'll get to hear hot off the press research from our 4th annual Plant Forward Opportunity Report with Data Central and Food for Climate League that will continue to inform your Plant Forward innovations. We are very proud to engage our entire CIA community in the Menus of Change. I'd like to acknowledge our CIA faculty and students, many of whom will be sitting in on the sessions, many who are supporting our food and beverage programs as part behind the scenes, in addition to some representing as moderators and panelists in the sessions. A special shout out to the students that you saw downstairs displaying their projects as part of the registration reception. And unfortunately, Sting the Bee is on vacation this year, so you'll have to come back next year for your photo op with Sting, which is the mascot of the CIA. Okay, before I wrap up, I want to share a few important reminders with you about how to make the most of your experience here at the summit. So available to you is an incredible array of resources that you can find on the Summit app. So if you haven't yet downloaded the app, please take a moment to do so. You can follow along and customize your schedule. You can connect with other attendees, find presentations, discussion topics, and more. So what you do is if you haven't yet, download the app, And then when you're in the app, search for Menus of Change 2024. And then you're going to log in using your first and last name and then your email associated with your registration. And then you are in. So if you haven't done it, I encourage you to take a moment to do so now. Throughout this summit, you'll have opportunities to submit Q&A questions, and we use Slido. So Slido you can find in the app, as well as you can pull it up on a browser, slido.com. This is a chance for you to submit questions to the moderator for the panelists for the panel sessions in our general sessions on the stage here. In addition to the app, we make all of the presentations, our recipes, summit resources available to attendees on the website through a password-protected page. So you should have received that password access, and you will receive it in the final details email that you receive from our team. Okay, thank you to our generous live stream sponsors who are listed on this slide. As I mentioned, we are live streaming the general sessions here, and they will also be recorded and available on the Menus of Change website. And this is a way for people to watch on demand. We're really grateful for this opportunity. It also helps us sort of spread the word and enact change across our industry. Speaking of sharing, we love it when you call us out on social media. We have the hashtag CIAMOC. This is a chance for you to share photos, share about your experience of Menus of Change, and you can tag the CIA in any of the platforms where you make your posts. And this concludes my important announcements right now. You'll be seeing a lot of me throughout the summit and over the next 2 days. Please don't hesitate to ask me questions or anyone wearing a CIA name badge. We're here to help you. We hope that you make the most of your experience, that you enjoy it. We have curated an unparalleled experience with delicious food and dynamic presentations and lots of chances for you to network. And we really do hope that you get to meet someone new and make some connections to support your change-making journey and toward our collective sustainable food future. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Rupa Bhattacharya, Executive Director of the Strategic Initiatives and Industry Leadership Group at the CIA, who will give her welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Abby. And thank you all, everyone, for being here. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to the 12th Annual Menus of Change Summit. As Abby said, we have an incredible dynamic lineup of speakers for you over the next couple days, and this is really the best time for it. It's such a time of critical urgency for all of the topics this conference addresses. Just quickly, to put everything in context, I want to talk a little bit about our approach to change, both as an institution as well as an umbrella of ideas. Menus of Change is bigger than this conference, right? It's an umbrella of ideas. It's an ecosystem. Like Abby said, there are so many parts of it. There's so many training programs. There are so many ways to make change in the world. And there's probably as many theories of change out there as there are people, probably more. But something I feel super strongly about, and something you'll see reflected in our programming over the next couple days, is the idea of mass incremental change being one of the most powerful and frankly one of the easiest ways to do good in the world. I mean, easy is a complicated word, right? Like, nothing is easy. If this were easy and all we had to do was call people up and be like, hey, did you know climate change? Not great. We wouldn't have climate change anymore, and it would be awesome. And like, we wouldn't have to do any of this, right? It would be fine. But that's not really how it works, unfortunately. But things do get easier the more hands you have on deck. And over the next couple of days, you'll see our programming is super focused as getting as many hands on deck as possible. How many of you were here last year? Were a lot of you here last year? Some of you? Great, awesome. So those of you who were, you saw us really lean into the idea of change itself, right? Like, we heard from some of the nation's leading experts on behavioral change and cultural change and societal change, what works, what doesn't, and how we get to where we need to be to make a difference in the world. This year, we're going even deeper into the topic. So it's not just about how change works, but it's also about how systems work too. How do we shift procurement systems to be better for our people on the planet? How do we empower chefs and other public figures to use their power for good? The more systems we can change, the more hands we can get on deck, the easier this job gets for everyone and the better our world becomes. So we're really hoping that you walk away from this conference with a full battery of tools, skills, inspiration, and delicious food that'll help you and your diners sustain their and our world. I'm really glad you're here with us. I'd like to do a quick round of thank yous before we kick things off. I'm going to drop the clicker as well. First of all, I'd like to thank Toast.org for their generous grant that helped us bring this programming to you. Our gold sponsors, 50 Cut and Custom Culinary. Our bronze sponsors, Aquamar, Illy, Jack and Annie's, the Kingfish Company, McCain Foodservice Solutions, and Oatly. All of our supporting sponsors and all of our corporate sponsors. In addition, I'd love to thank, our media sponsors and our research collaborators as well. In addition, I'd love to thank the members of our Menus of Change Science and Technical Advisory Council, as well as our Business Leadership Council, many of whom are here today. So if you see them, please shout them out and thank them for all their generous contributions with their time, their ideas, and their thoughts to all of our work, as well as our partners at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health for making this such a fruitful collaboration over the past 12 years. And speaking of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, it's now my pleasure to introduce Walter Willett, who I suspect doesn't really need much of an introduction to most of you in this room. Walter is a professor of epidemiology and nutrition at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, a longstanding partner and friend of the CIA, and one of the most cited scientists of all time. Maybe the most cited? Maybe? I mean, hard to tell, right? Please join me in welcoming Walter Willett for his opening remarks.
Great. Well, thank you, Rupa, and I will, on behalf of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, also welcome you here today. It's going to be a wonderful 2 days for sure. I do also want to thank the CIA for inviting us to their wonderful, wonderful campus here and turning out a beautiful day for us. Hopefully you can walk around outside a little bit during the breaks. It is fantastic. But most important, I too want to thank you for coming here today. This is one of my favorite meetings of the year because I get to hear from people in so many different fields with whom I don't usually interact, and there's so much creativity right here sitting in this room. It's truly amazing and inspirational. Of course, people are here because we do share a common concern, and for good reason, that if we look at the big picture situation, we are not headed in a great direction. We do see climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, global temperatures going up, and we haven't bent the curve. On the health side, our obesity epidemic here and in most countries around the world is continuing to head upwards. We haven't been able to bend that curve either. And in the United States, pretty different than most of the world, life expectancy is actually going down. And a lot of that is fueled by poor diets and the obesity epidemic. And then on top of that, in an academic institution, now we have a real problem with climate change anxiety. And I can't just say, don't worry about it, things are going to be fine. No, actually, we are headed in a bad direction. And they're asking, what can we do? What actions are there that we can take? And of course, that's what this meeting is about, is actions and making change. So we do need the creativity. It's here. When we look at the big picture, there's no single solution. This is a big, complicated task to really change the direction in which the world is headed. We have to have people in the education world, from kindergarten up to the university, taking on these challenges of teaching, but also providing experiences of healthy eating. We need to be doing much more in the health sector. We're actually not doing much. In fact, can I just ask you to raise your hands? How many people here were asked by their healthcare provider about their diet the last time they were visited? A couple. Wow, that's good. Maybe 2%, but that's improvement. And it is starting to penetrate the medical care world. That a lot of our physicians out there they're smart people. They're realizing they're missing something that they didn't get in medical school. And in fact, the most important determinant of health and well-being in the long run is what we eat. So we're starting to see there something in that area, but a lot of work has to be done there. And of course, the food service world is critically important, and that's why we are here today, because there's so much innovation, and not just feeding people, but also giving people an experience that they can take when they go home and think about what they're going to have for dinner, even when they're not in one of your food services. So this is all really important. Again, I'm grateful for everybody who's here today. I know we share a lot in common, knowing we have to make some changes, and we have to have a lot of creativity to do that. So thank you, and I look forward to a really great couple of days.
Speaking of change and system change, I'm so delighted to get to introduce you to one of the most dynamic change makers in the field, Danielle Nierenberg, who will be moderating our first general session. Danny is the co-founder and president of Food Tank and an unbelievable force for good on all issues relating to our food system and agriculture. We're truly so fortunate to have her today. So please join me in welcoming Danielle Nierenberg.
Hey everyone. Can I invite my panelists to follow me so we can do introductions? Good morning. Hello. It's so nice to be back here at Menus of Change. I love Rupa, and I'm so glad to be here and so glad to see many old friends and new friends. It is really a huge honor for me personally to be here at the Culinary Institute of America. I want to thank them for organizing the Menus of Change conference. This is a very special event, and I want us to all sort of feel that because we often don't get these kind of opportunities. Rupa told you that I run Food Tank. Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization that is really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems. And we do this with the intent to motivate, inspire, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. And that's why I'm so happy to be here today with folks who really care about what and how we eat and care about farmers and ranchers and fishers and foragers and so many others and restaurant service workers and so many other folks who are involved in every aspect of the food system. Before I introduce the panel, I want to share some things that I've been thinking about. And two very important awards or recognitions were announced over the last few months. And they caught my eye because they sort of indicate that food system transformation is actually happening in real time. And it goes back to that mass incremental change that Rupa talked about in her remarks. So the first one I want to talk about just happened, and the Culinary Institute's own Rupa Bhattacharya and Roshara Saunders were named by Food & Wine as two of their 2024 game changers. And this recognizes individuals and companies changing the future of cooking, dining, and drinking. So it's a very big deal, and I want to give them a round of applause, please. And I want to share something Rupa said to me during an interview I had with her last year. She said, essentially what the Culinary Institute of America does is we lead the restaurant industry in terms of sustainability, nutrition, and public health, and big ideas and food, all through the lens of empathy, humanity, and flavor. She said this boils down to figuring out ways to make the world better with food. And Rupa told Food & Wine that with updates to the culinary curricula here at the Institute, they are encouraging a shift in the way diversity is seen. 20, 10, or even 5 years ago, leaders in food and agriculture were not talking in quite this way. Those leaders looked and sounded very different than many of the emerging leaders we are seeing today who run nonprofits or restaurants or farms. We're seeing younger folks like Rupa and Roshara for sure, but also people who come to leadership through openness and inclusivity, and who come to food and agriculture with a very different perspective than previous generations. And that is because they are coming from different backgrounds. And it's really, really important. I think we all understand that it's important to have those diverse voices and to listen to them and to act upon what they're saying. So again, I'm very proud to be in a place where this is being embraced by two women I admire very much. So thanks to them. The second award that I want to acknowledge and was really excited to hear about was this year's recipients of the World Food Prize, which was awarded to people I have admired my whole career, Jeffrey Houghton and Carrie Fowler. And according to the World Food Prize Foundation, they were recognized for their leadership in preserving and protecting the world's heritage of crop biodiversity and mobilizing this critical resource to defend threats against global food security. Over the last 50 years, says the foundation, their combined efforts as researchers, policy advisors, thought leaders, and advocates have succeeded in engaging governments, scientists, farmers, and civil society towards the conservation of 6,000 species of crops and culturally important plants. I should mention that this is a very big change for the World Food Prize. Foundation, which is led by the very politically conservative former governor of Iowa, Terry Branstad. The organization has typically given the prize to who I kind of consider the usual suspects, like crop scientists or chemists, some of whom work with big agribusiness or big research centers. Not bad folks fighting the good fight, but these are not people typically like Jeffrey or Carrie, who started the Crop Trust to protect agricultural diversity and make sure that seeds from all over the world were saved and protected for the future of humanity. To be clear, Jeffrey and Carrie, who now serves as the U.S. Special Envoy for Global Food Security, are white men in their 70s. And I'm honored really to know them both. What I like most about them is they recognize that food systems can only thrive with diversity. Diversity of crops for sure, but also diversity of thought and an understanding that cultural diversity is just as important as the diversity on our plates and in our bowls. So that is something I hope we can keep in mind over the next few days here during our discussions and conversations both in this room and outside of it. Whether we're talking about terrestrial agriculture, blue foods, or plant-forward meals, we can only transform the food system when we have a diversity of people, thought, innovations, practices, and technologies. With that, I want to thank the Culinary Institute of America again for putting this conversation together on nourishing, sustainable, and just food futures as we think about ways to set countries, companies, and consumers on a healthier, more equitable, and more resilient path forward. We have a great group of speakers, so let me introduce them quickly and thank them all for being here. First, we have Mario Herrero, a professor in the Cornell Cowles Department of Global Development, the Director of Food Systems and Global Change, a Cornell Atkinson Scholar, and a Nancy and Peter Manning family investigator and life scientist. Whew. I've known Mario for a very long time. He's been a good friend, and it's so inspiring to see how his career has evolved since I first knew him maybe 20 years ago now. It's a long time. Next, we have the wonderful Walter Willett, who you've already heard from, and if I read his whole bio, we would not have time for the panel, and Rupa did a good job of introducing him. I have to say that Walt has been a warrior on these issues for many years, so thank you for your commitment, Walt. And we're joined by Veronica Womack, the Executive Director of the World Studies Institute at Georgia College and State University, and the founder of the Black Farmers Network, which is an organization I admire so much. It's so wonderful to have you. So give them a round of applause, please. Let's keep this energy up. So I'm hoping, Mario, that you can help me set sort of the stage for this conversation. You're a co-chair for the Food Systems Countdown Initiative, which tracks global food systems and their progress as we move toward 2030, which is now 6 short years away. Can you briefly talk about the state of of our food systems today? And again, 2030 is around the corner.
Yes, thanks a lot, Danny. Yes, and it's 20 years since we met in Kenya the first time. So that's quite amazing.
I was 17.
Yes, me too. Well, I think that Walter alluded to what's happening with the food system at the moment. I think that we are in real dire straits with a food system that is actually creating a very, very significant dent on most of the environmental metrics that we tend to follow. It's a significant contributor to greenhouse gases. It is also the major user of water in the world, and at the same time, it's the biggest land user on Earth. So it's fully connected to key areas where we're already trespassing the boundaries to maintain the world functioning as we know it. At the same time, we have a triple burden of nutrition. Obesity is rampant. Undernutrition is still, we haven't made significant dents in the last year, especially after COVID, in curbing undernutrition epidemics, and there's micronutrient deficiencies in many parts of the world. This is something that has a real equity an equity perspective, because there's a lot of people that don't have and a lot of people that have, and the policies that we are actually promoting at the moment are really not protecting those that are most vulnerable. And this is something that is fundamental that we need to remedy significantly. And
So since we're not protecting the folks who are most vulnerable, who happen to be farmers, mostly farmers across the world, what kind of progress has the countdown tracked? And both, I guess, progress and also decline. So you mentioned we're not making enough progress on malnutrition. Where are you seeing movement on how we respect and honor farmers?
Well, that's a really good question. We have, for example, real problems in sub-Saharan Africa, and that's where we see the biggest issues around undernutrition. But we have made significant progress in places like India, in places like Southeast Asia, where some of the rates have improved, and where we see also the agricultural sector being mobilized to help, increase the wealth, the livelihoods of farmers all around. We see increases in yields in smallholder farms that are quite significant and are feeding local populations. A key to this is that they are much better integrated to markets, they're getting much better integrated with the private industry, and so on. The market creation as part of this is fundamental to actually provide the incentives for farmers to be able to sell their produce and to move from, being just dependent on a few food crops for their nourishment to become market-oriented farmers.
And the ability of farmers to organize and be able to do that collectively, I imagine, is a huge part of this. And Valerie, I want to turn, Veronica, I apologize, my goodness. Veronica, if we can talk about the people, put a human face to this, the farmers, especially small and medium scale farmers. If we want to see if we want to see the changes in how food is produced and create that sort of planet-friendly diet that we all talk about, what is the infrastructure that those farmers need? Whether it's intellectual infrastructure or actual infrastructure like materials.
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak with all of you today. We have to build a new infrastructure. The current infrastructure is really designed for large-scale farming. And so if you're small-scale farmers, it's very difficult to break into the system and be able to sustain yourself economically. So I consider myself to be a storyteller, a professional storyteller of the Black Belt region. So I'm a political scientist by training, so I do look at agricultural policy.
Right.
And so if you look at agricultural policy in this country, it is very much designed for larger scale farmers. So I think opportunities to increase resources for small scale farmers in the Farm Bill would be very beneficial, but also the connection between agricultural policy and health policy would also be very, very beneficial. Let me tell you a little bit about the Black Belt region from which I hail, and the work that I do is focused in that region. It's a very historical region that is agriculturally based historically, and it extends from eastern Texas to the eastern shores of Virginia. So it's a very rural community that has great agrarian tradition and roots. We traditionally have had a lot of small-scale farmers. And when we talk about farmers in rural America, I'm the executive director of the Rural Studies Institute, so rural communities are struggling. So a lot of the communities that the farmers reside do not have the infrastructure for 21st century, production. When you think about needing technology to increase your yield or to be more climate friendly, you really need broadband for that.
Right.
And so we still have some small scale farmers who may live in places that can't even get online. So how do you do precision farming if you are not connected to high speed, high quality broadband? We also have a lack of infrastructure in terms of financial ability. So when you think about farmers and the need for capital, we don't normally see small-scale farmers as small business owners. When we think about startup funding, how much of that is going to start small farms? So there's a lot of infrastructure, not just water, sewage, which we still need in many communities in the Black Belt. We need broadband, we need financial contribution as well so that we can grow our businesses or start our businesses. I want to just briefly talk about African American farmers in general, because I'm the founder of the Black Farmers Network, which is a storytelling platform. One of the things that I found is that people know very little about the history of African American farmers and their story. And so most of us are getting that story in 2-minute sound bites, and it doesn't really tell the complete story. So we have the latest census data to come out with the 22 ag census. And out of 3.2 million producers, more than 3.2 million producers, less than 42,000 of them are African American farmers. Most of those farmers are located in the Black Belt region. They also own less than 1% of the land in the country. Okay, so this is New York Times gave us 2 wonderful maps. And so you can see the Black Belt region there very distinctly from eastern Texas to the eastern shore of Virginia. And then you can also see it in its most current form on the right. And so we're talking about a very small group of farmers with very distinct challenges, because not only they're small in number, but they typically are in communities that are under-resourced and underdeveloped. So when we're talking about connecting them with a 21st century global economy, we have to build the infrastructure for them. And I'm specifically talking about African American farmers, but all small-scale farmers, regardless of color or region, need an infrastructure in order to be successful. And we currently don't have that. The USDA presently defines small-scale farmers as farmers that make between $1,000 and $250,000 on their farming. So that's not a lot of money. And when you think about making sure that you can feed your family, that you can keep your land, and all of those things that go with it, it's very difficult for them. And so we've got to move beyond just thinking of small farmers giving to the local farmers market on the weekend. How can they plug into institutions of higher education, K through 12 institutions? How can nursing homes? Most of your farmers survive with institutional markets, but you have to be able to have a significant yield to tap those markets. So when we talk about infrastructure, we've got to also talk about market opportunities, as well as the age of the American farmer. And how do we replace? So where is the succession plan? What happens when the farmers no longer, are around, and if we don't make it something that's viable? Those of us that work on college campuses work with young people. This generation of people, yes, they love nostalgia, but they also want to be able to survive.
Absolutely.
And so we've got to create some markets and some infrastructure for them to be able to go into the market.
But that capital that you mentioned before for small scale and medium scale farmers is almost completely lacking. For communities of color, Black and brown folks. It's practically non-existent. How do we change that?
I think we need to really change the language about what a small business is, and then change policy, change infrastructure, have greater conversations and reinforcement from the financial institutions that they will assist
Yeah.
with this. We've got to think about farming differently than we
Absolutely.
have, and that there's room at the table for all kinds of farmers. We need all kinds
Sure.
of farmers. We need more female farmers. I mean, we need, we have a focus on veteran farmers right now, but we, in small rural communities where we have very limited access to, grocery stores with fresh fruits and vegetables, that local farmer can be phenomenal
Yeah.
in supporting their community, and then the community supporting them if we have the will and the intentionality to make these things happen.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to your point in a little while about storytelling and vocabulary and semantics. I think they're very important. But well, before we do that, we've been talking for a long time, and you said it in your earlier remarks. We're on a path that is not the right one right now. And I'm wondering how optimistic you are, as somebody who's been in the space for a long time, talking to so many different kinds of folks. Are you optimistic about how we can change what we produce and what we eat?
Oh, you're asking a tough question. That we have to have some optimism, or else we just give up and sort of close up shop. Thank you. Yes, we have to be optimistic, or else we wouldn't be here today. Realizing there is potential for a transformation that would be better in so many different ways.
Yeah.
It would be better for the direct health effects. It would be better for the environment, which in turn has some additional, if we clean up the environment in terms of air pollution, water pollution, that has some additional health benefits.
Sure.
And I think it has social benefits too. I think is what Veronica was talking about, having intact communities. The social network of our country is getting frayed. I think we all are aware of that, and loss of empathy. All the surveys show that, and that results in anxiety and depression. It's really, all of this is connected. So I think we have to go forward.
Yeah.
It's probably, I guess I've been working on things long enough that we seldom get to the total vision of where we would like to be, but we want to come as close as we can to making that possible. And we have seen that changes in what we eat and diets are possible. Of course, most of the changes until fairly recently have been in the wrong direction. But there are some things. Red meat has come down per capita 40% since the early 1970s. We worked on trans fat elimination there. We actually got it out of the diets of almost all the people around the world. It took us a few decades to do that. This meeting and CIA partnership was really important in working with food services. It started off small, but it grew, the movement grew, and finally, after it was pretty much all gone, FDA eliminated it. It made it illegal, but it was pretty much gone by that time in 2018. And we've seen sugar-sweetened beverage consumption go down by somewhere on the order of 30% as well. So we can make changes, and we know it's possible. There's a lot of things that are going on. I think many people in this room are engaged in change making. They haven't yet been enough collectively to bend the overall curve that we see. But I think just means we need to redouble our efforts. It is possible to get where we need to go, but we have to have virtually everybody engaged at every level.
I'm wondering, Mario, how do we get everyone engaged at every level if that's what Walt thinks we need to do?
Well, we need definitely new instruments for engaging in this debate. One of them could be something like the true cost of food, for example. And we have been working significantly on that topic. And what we found since the UN Food System Summit, and what we found is that if you take into account just the current prices, the total value of food that exists is about $7 trillion. If you actually, on top of that, included the issues that we're creating in terms of, land use change, pesticide increases, damaging waterways, the greenhouse gases that are emitted, you add $14 trillion. So we're basically just accounting for about a third of the actual costs of the food system. But we should not be fooled, because we are paying already
Right.
for those things. How? Well, in the health burdens of overconsumption and all the poor food choices that we make. Maybe it's not allocated to the agricultural industries, but certainly the health sector is bearing a brunt with non-communicable diseases and these other things. So one of the ways that we are trying to change the narrative is that perhaps if we invest a little bit up front, then you can actually generate, better behaviors in terms of how we produce food for consumers. And if we can actually start decreasing the true costs of food, that would be one of the ways that we could actually start creating a different set of incentives reflecting different kinds of values that we need to create this transition. We have a project now funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, where we're looking at how do we implement true cost approaches in public procurement in New York State. And we built a tool where we can actually calculate the true cost of food for, any food that you have in the US. Take an apple. An apple has a different true cost whether you grow it organically or whether you grow it with lots of pesticides and lots of nitrogen fertilizer. It's very different if your consumer is in New York, whether you purchase a local apple or whether you bring it from Washington, where you will have increased costs, refrigeration, and a range of other things. So we're trying to account for those things to actually, recalculate the additional costs that vendors have to incur, and then, create a system for weighing the bids so that New York state agencies can actually purchase not only cheap food, but food that is more environmentally friendly.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, this power of procurement is a big thing.
Yeah.
Veronica brought it up as well. Can you talk about how we make sure that there's a policy lever in place so that we can get true cost a part of municipal governments, a part of our federal government, because we're not there yet.
No, we're definitely not there. And we are doing, we are testing this and even talking to, to the mayor's office. We're trying to actually get this towards passing, changing legislation.
Sure.
Things like that. So this is a societal conversation with key actors that needs to occur, simply because, we need to also change the accountability of who does what in the food system. And that is something fundamental,
Right.
We get heaps of global reports, and they're all produced with the best of intentions. They all have lists of things that we should do, but they are all anonymous. They don't have the actor that needs to make the change, the actor that really needs to move for something to happen. And that is something that we really need to focus on in the transformation. Who does what, and how do we actually monitor how that person is doing in terms of the promised actions?
Sure.
Fundamental.
Veronica, can you comment on this procurement issue and how you mentioned it? If we could procure from local, regional, small and medium scale farmers, we could change what the food system looks like. We could change what schools and hospitals and senior homes are, what those folks are eating. But we're not. Again, we haven't convinced policymakers. What kind of story do we need to tell them?
Oh gosh, I was just about to say we have to have a different story. We have to have a different story about why we need to do this. I think I do a lot of work with colleagues around climate issues as it relates to ag, and we haven't found a compelling story why people actually have to do this, and more importantly, what does the transition look like and who's going to pay for it?
Sure.
We can't, the farmers can't carry the financial burden of transitioning us into the direction that we want to go in. So we have to have some intentionality, but we also have to have that in the procurement. There has to be a real focus on local food systems. I think after COVID, or during COVID, for the first time in probably most of our lifetimes, we may have gone into some grocery stores and we didn't have everything there that we normally would have there, and people started to think about the logistics of food. And so I think we can now have that conversation with people, and they remember enough about that time that there needs to be more focus on local food production for all of the reasons that you discussed, Walter, about environment and transportation. And so when we think about procurement, how can we develop local procurement systems? I'm not saying everything comes from local, but that we do strengthen local production, and we feed our local farmers, that they have local markets, that most African American farmers, and that's why I'm here to speak about that particular experience, they own between 10 and 50 acres. So they can't supply a Walmart.
Sure.
That farmer cannot supply, and most of our small farmers can't supply the institutional markets alone. There would need to be intentional collective action, which we do have farmers co-ops that do that.
Sure.
And so it's about talking to people who have long traditions of cooperative work with farmers. We have several organizations, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, the National Black Growers Council, the Southwest Georgia Project, the 1890 institutions. You know, these are people that have all kinds of historical knowledge about how to leverage collective work for the benefit of the community. So how do we leverage those organizations to start thinking about transitioning local food systems in a way that would support the farmer financially, but also support communities that don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables and, you know, organic food?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mario. Quickly, you have a comment?
Yeah, just very quickly. And the private industry has a real, a real leverage in this, because it's not, for example, when we talk about true cost and food procurement, it's not really about applying sticks to everybody. Oh, you know, you're terrible at producing. It's flipping it. If you produce well, then we will actually perhaps give you a price premium or something like that. And then we actually incentivize good behavior, which is what we want to do. And this is something that, you know, many industries have had good success at having, price premiums attached to them. Take milk. Originally, it was, you know, just on the basis of sediments. How clean was the milk? Then it was really about, you know, fat percentage. They paid for fat percentage and the quality and the cleanness of the milk. And then it became total solids. And, you know, so the day you could imagine, well, if you're producing under a threshold of emissions, then I'll give you another little price premium. If you're producing in a slightly different way. And that you build pricing systems that are responsive to the environmental and social objectives that we want.
Walt, I want to turn to you because Mario's been talking about how incentives can change, and the private sector is a huge part of this. And you and I might disagree about what I'm about to ask you, but I feel like there's been progress from USDA over the last 3.5 years. They released their equity action plans. There are other signs of progress with the administration's national strategy on hunger, nutrition, and health. I always get it backwards. But I feel like you and I have talked a lot about USDA in the past. Are they doing enough to make sure that we are getting, you know, the right incentives, that we can do procurement differently?
Yes, USDA is a huge organization, and it's impossible to generalize about it. It has so many different programs, and many of them just internally contradictory is part of the problem. So there's so many wonderful people who work there doing some wonderful things, and they run a really good program like WIC, and they run SNAP, which really was instrumental in keeping a lot of people out of deep, deep trouble during COVID. But still, it doesn't really encourage people in any way to move toward healthier diets, even though it's said to be a nutrition program. The biggest reimbursement for SNAP is for sugar-sweetened beverages, which is undermining the health of participants. So they could do a lot more. I think last year we talked about their roadmap for USDA was about $1 billion that they were spending, and it was for building more slaughterhouses across the country. That's not what we need. It was to, I guess, sort of empower small beef producers, but they're going to have a hard time competing against Cargill and Tyson and those. But if that had been spent on, like what Veronica was talking about, creating infrastructure for fruits and vegetables and healthy foods, because those are, people can compete with the big players there because there's an advantage to be smaller and more local there. So shifting the emphasis at USDA from beef to healthier foods would be helpful. Now, USDA doesn't exist in a vacuum, of course. We know the beef industry is extraordinarily powerful. And they actually, in 2015, they got a law passed in Congress that the USDA can't say anything about the environmental effects of food. Talking to my colleagues in Washington, they say that was for that budget year, and USDA could be doing that, but USDA ripped out a whole chapter from the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee about the environmental effects of food. Sure. They basically censored it. But there was can't really blame USDA per se. That was Congress that was bowing to the beef lobby. So in this country, just the way the power structure is, it gives a lot of extra power to beef producers in Wyoming and Nebraska and places like that, that is very disproportional to the actual citizens here, which is one reason a lot of these changes are going to start more locally, not from on top. And all these things I mentioned, tobacco smoking, getting those out of restaurants, that started with a couple little towns, Brookline in Massachusetts. Trans fat started with elimination in one little town north of San Francisco, and it grew. So I think just on many issues, that's the way it worked. Mayor Bloomberg at the city level was instrumental in getting many important changes done, including trans fat elimination. And some people, Roger Berkowitz, a restaurant group in Boston, he doesn't like to call it chain, but it was instrumental there in showing it could be done. So I think the private sector, and many people here have been engaged in those activities. It's really important because it can start small and and go upwards. We've seen that time and time again, and so many of these areas, just given the nature of our Constitution and Congress and country, a lot of things have to start at that level. But in the end, I think we do have to pay farmers to do things in a better way because we all benefit. And that's not radical. We've had the land banking program for many, many decades, and we just need to use that mechanism, I think, expand it and adjust the criteria to reward farmers for producing healthy food and also capturing carbon at the same time, because we can't put all the economic burden on the farmers per se.
For sure. And I think this goes back to the point that was made earlier, that farmers are more than just food producers. They are small business and large business owners. They need to be compensated fairly for the ecosystem services they provide that benefit us all. I think all of these things are true, but we haven't reached the level of where there's a greater understanding of that. So this gets me back in the few minutes that we have left, and I also want to ask you all for a call for action. This goes back to what Veronica said about storytelling, narrative, vocabulary. We need to change the semantics, right? We talk about true cost accounting. We talk about equity and affordability and access. We talk about nutrition, but people aren't making the linkages, right? So what can people in this room, what can people like me who tries very hard to communicate effectively, not always, how can we change the way we're telling stories? Veronica, please go first.
I think it's very important to highlight real people and tell their story, and also talk about the cultural connection. So if you are, I had a wonderful conversation with some ladies earlier this morning. We were talking about if you just tell me I need to have a plant-forward diet, and you haven't connected that to me culturally, then that's a story that doesn't resonate with me.
Right.
But if you talk about food ethnography in the southern region, in the Black Belt, you're talking about, you know, the greens and the peas and the beans, and you're telling that story, that resonates with
Absolutely.
me, right? And so I think telling the story of the need for us to feed rural communities as well, that these are places that now that we have connection to broadband, or we will get that opens up the whole world to us. It also opens up markets that we did not have before.
Right.
And so we have to think about that. But if we're asking farmers to transition to something that they don't have a market, that they're going to have to bear the burden, a significant percentage of African American farmers are in the cattle industry. So what's the plan for the
Right.
cattle industry? How do we, you know, if what you're saying is counter to my livelihood,
Right.
then I'm not going to go with that, right? So if they say, okay, we're getting rid of all of universities in this country, we don't need them anymore, the three of us, we would band together and try to figure out how we stop this.
Right.
So I think the story that we're telling about this need for transition has to include people's experience.
Absolutely.
And it has to have a way forward that they are included in. Now we can talk about it. I see my way as being a part of this, and I don't have to always be on the counter.
Right.
And Walter is right. All of this is in the context of a political system that's fractured, right? And so for me, local is very important. Educating people and telling the story is most important about health, healthy community, healthy, the agrarian tradition of this country. You know, people ask me all the time, why are you doing rural, you know, studies outside of an ag program? Because agrarianism goes beyond agriculture.
Right.
And so that's the story that we have to tell. These farmers are more than just farmers. They're leaders in their community. When a farm goes belly up, that is someone in a community, a small community often, that was a taxpayer in that community, a leader in that community.
Right.
And so it's just the stories that we tell matter.
Absolutely. Mario
Don't
and
get me
Walt, when you're telling stories through science and scientific studies and papers, it's a little bit different, but it's still a story that needs to be told. How have you both evolved in doing this over the last couple of decades as the links between environment, diet, and sort of our health become more and more apparent? Walt?
Sure. Yes, my job, daytime job, is doing research on the relationship between diet and health. And we've learned a lot of things that we thought were true based on not much evidence turn out not to be true, including that all fat is bad, not true, and the type of fat is good, yes, true. So we can publish our data and we get academic credit for that. But if we stop there, then it may sit on a shelf.
Right.
And that's why I come to this meeting, actually.
Sure.
Because this is a way of translating, providing scientific evidence that people can rely on to make decisions that will be robust, stand up with the test of time. That's our job, primary job. And I then found it really useful to work with, the CIA and other groups too. Center for Science in the Public Interest has been a strong advocacy group, and we did quite a bit with them on a number of different issues, and that's been helpful. So having partnerships is really important. We can't do this ourselves. We do try to, we have our website, Nutrition Source, is a place where we put information which we think is reliable and evidence-based. And of course, we like to say that something is 100% certain or 0% certain.
Sure.
It's always some shade in between.
Absolutely.
And we always have to we're making decisions. We're going to eat. We have to decide what to eat.
Exactly.
Some things we rationally will do, even though it's not 100%. If it's 98%, that's good enough for making most decisions. So I think a partnership with many other groups is critically important.
That collaboration is key, isn't it, Mario, for your work in the last minute we have left?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Walter that, broad collaboration to develop roadmaps of change. I always say, well, how do I turn a dairy farmer into, say, a strawberry farmer or a zucchini farmer? Can you imagine how hard that is when you have milking machines and, a lot of potentially stranded assets? So what's the first step? We need to really start thinking of how this will work. What are the kinds of roadmaps? Involve the financial sector as well, because ultimately somebody will have to pay for this at a certain interest rate, and the farmer will have to pay these premiums. And then these plans need to be realistic beyond the academic sphere.
Yeah.
So I think that we really need to be much better at integrating different actors that have played a smaller part so far in this transition. And I think that I'm in 0 minutes.
I'm going to use my moderator role to take an extra 30 seconds. You each have 10 seconds for a call to action. Mario.
Okay, call for action for me is test things. Test them, do a lot more pilots, test them, fail fast, but we really need to be exploring really a lot of things because, we really don't know how to create these transition plans and do it through the private industry or through your own organizations.
Veronica.
My call to action would be for everyone in this room to contact your K through 12 system and ask them to source local for some of their food. And that would help us transition young people into better eating practices. It would support the local community, and it would give, I think, us a real boost in people understanding how all of this works. So I would like for everyone to start local, and let's work on the young folks in our community.
Thank you so much, Walt. Last word.
Yeah, just wherever you are, and everybody can have a role here. Think about what you can do to take action, and it may be if we're working in procurement, but it may also be if you're a school teacher putting in your lesson plan. I think everybody can make some difference no matter where they are.
Amazing. Please give these panelists a round of applause. They were awesome. Thank you again.